Okay, here's the next t-shirt. We are now in August of 2014, which means I've now gone to university for a few months already. And I believe this t-shirt was in the context of me visiting family in the south of Germany. So let's have a quick look at it. So you can see a green heart with like PCB traces on here, and it says Demo Days in Olten, Switzerland 2014. So this is another t-shirt from a demo party. So this is another demo party, demo scene t-shirt. So the timeline of where we are at right now should be pretty clear. I started my master's degree in computer science in Berlin, and I believe I was visiting my family in the south of Germany. And while I was visiting down there, I also wanted to visit the Shack Space again because, you know, I've missed the Shack Space so much. And of course, there are also people I really liked, and so I just wanted to go there and hang out. And so this is something I would sometimes do, like take the car from my parents, drove the hour to the Shack Space and hung out there like on the weekend or something. I mean, I only did this a handful of times. It's not like I was often visiting my family because I was living in Berlin, quite far away. But if I remember this correctly, I met an old friend at Shack Space. It's actually the guy who dragged me to, you know, my first demo party and who was the guy who introduced me to the Shack Space in the first place. And I believe he told me about this upcoming demo party, and I think he asked me if I wanted to come along. Again, this was a time where I had my anxiety, where everything I would do, like especially spontaneously, would like trigger panic attacks and I would throw up and stuff like this. So actually I cannot explain anymore why I would agree of going there. I believe I must have just trusted him very well. Probably I told him about my issues. I don't remember anymore, but he's a very nice guy and I trusted him a lot. So I believe I must have just told him my issues. And typically when I tell friends like what I was suffering, it was easier for me to do stuff, and because then I felt like protected in a way. Just a few more words about the anxiety stuff. Something I noticed and observed was when I did go on trips like this, oftentimes actually my anxiety was kind of gone through the duration of the trip, which kind of reminded me of what normalcy can look like. In my regular day-to-day, the anxiety would constantly trigger. I would throw up in university. I would throw up if I like go outside and whatever. Like, it was insane. But if I managed to go on trips like this, and I've also like traveled to other places a little bit, it wouldn't really trigger. So that was kind of weird, but all I can say is I remember this demo party like very positively. I don't think I had major issues there. And so yes, spontaneously I drove with him and 2 or 3 other friends down to Switzerland to this demo party. And this is a demo party where I actually also submitted an entry for one competition. Unfortunately, nothing cool, like no actual like 3D music stuff. It was a picture. There was a picture competition. And here's my entry. Look at this. I'm really proud of this picture. I think it looks really, really cool. This is a picture in an old abandoned wood factory. This picture is actually from a trip with my girlfriend at the time. We were doing like a trip through Germany, visiting abandoned places. I didn't really research much. She did most of the research and figured out a lot of cool places to visit. But that place, that photo was actually discovered on our trip. It was not a known location in like the urban exploring scene. We were just randomly driving through the middle of nowhere, like going somewhere else. And we drove by what looked like a factory, and she noticed that like the roof was caved in, wood just kind of collapsed. And that made us wonder, wait, this must mean this thing is abandoned. Let's go explore it. And that place was the most amazing abandoned place I've ever been at, because it basically was untouched. There was no or almost no graffiti, no destruction. Everything was still laying around. Like all the props, all the tools, like hammers and saws and jars of like nails and whatnot, like everything was still kind of like originally as if they just had left almost. And it was a really, really old school factory. Like everything was made out of wood and like metal beams, and there were these old carts that you could wheel around. Just right next to it was also a train track, so probably, you know, that was also used then for, you know, shipment and arrival of like wood stuff. It was an incredible place. And as you can see on these pictures, it just looks amazing. Like it was such a cool place. Right next to the main factory building, there was also just like a more modern building, which was full of offices with a lot of old documents. Like they still had all the folder files with like all the invoices and whatever. And so that's how we learned that it was like a wood factory. We spent 2 days exploring this place. It was amazing. Anyway, the picture I was really proud of, and because there was this photo category at this demo party, I submitted this picture. And I actually got second place. Here's my trophy, I still have it. Let's have a quick look at it. So as you can see here, Demo Days 2014, second place, photo retouching competition. And it's like out of marble or some kind of stone, it's very heavy. And on top you can see this cow. It's a 3D printed cow. And I remember they telling us like what's up with this cow. I believe it's like kind of an insider reference, some kind of like history stuff with like the demo party scene. I'm sorry, I don't remember, but I do remember there was something special about this cow. Anyway, really proud of it. I still have it like sitting out in my apartment as like decoration. One last thing that I could mention, you know that I've been now working like as a freelancer a little bit for Q53 at the time. So I was a bit more focused on like web security. And I remember that during this demo party, I was trying to build a tool that would help me in pen testing web applications. I don't think I have any screenshots or even the code around anymore. Here's LiveOverflow during editing. Never mind, I actually went back into some old backups and I looked for it and I found it. It was called Nutso. Here's the README page and it kind of describes what it does. Nutso tracks URLs, cookies, parameters and forms in websites for later evaluation. The idea was that you could load this Chrome browser extension and it would continuously scan and look at all the requests and cookies and stuff that's happening and send it to a backend server, a service that collects all these URLs for later evaluation and analysis. Here you can see that I have, for example, enabled this extension to track URLs on liveoverflow.com, and you can see then here all the logged paths. Now, it doesn't really have a lot of features, but the idea was basically that it would log all these URLs and then you could create URL filters. And you could, for example, by hand then say, wait, this portion of the URL is actually an identifier. And the green part of a URL is just static. It doesn't really have any meaning. And by filtering those unfiltered inputs, you can classify them into buckets and then you would know, oh, this is an endpoint with parameters I still need to check. And eventually you would have a lot of filters and you would keep using the site, and when you stumble over new functionality you haven't discovered before, it would pop up as an unfiltered URL that you still haven't looked at. The main idea of doing it manually with the filters instead of, for example, automatically trying to detect with slashes is that when you do like pen testing for really terrible web applications, then they have ideas where they use like semicolons in the URL to differentiate certain parts of the URL, or they use other symbols. And you know, tools like burp were really good when it was divided by slashes, then you have the burp features. But if the application used a different way, then the output would just be super cluttered in burp. And so I wanted an application that eventually even automatically can detect what are parameters and so forth. But the first step was doing this manually. Anyway, back to the original video. I'm telling you again because I constantly like work on projects like this. And I learned a lot through this. It was again web engineering, web development, thinking about tooling that could help me to do a better job in IT security, auditing websites and so forth. You know, just constantly practicing, constantly exposing to this kind of stuff. And even though this tool was never actually usable and I spent probably dozens or hundreds of hours on this, I don't think that this is wasted time. I actually think this is exactly the stuff you should be doing if you want to get better. But I mean, I'm full of survivorship bias. I'm just telling you how I experienced like my path. Anyway, let's move on.